Hello everybody, welcome to the Art Lounge Alley. This is Figure Drawing Basics Part 90. It's getting closer to 100 actually. I'm your host and this is what we're dealing with today. For those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, I started a new lesson this week, and it's about using models to create different type of characters, different kind of faces, and just kind of playing around with features on a face. You know, not feeling constrained by the model itself, and feeling adventurous enough to push, pull, elongate features to create something different. Now you could see that throughout these drawings, these faces, there is this commonality, there is certain similarities there. And just to give you guys examples of some of the changes, as you could see over here, with this being the original model, this being the photo that I was working from, she has a pompadour, so kind of moved that towards the back, created a bun while reducing the size of it, took off the glasses, gave her nose a little bit more of, I guess, like a little bit more of like a pointiness to it, and elongated a bit. The mouth, you could see, is pretty similar, but I also reduced the chin, like underneath the chin. I reduced that and elongated her neck in comparison. So yeah, there are certain elements that I kept, certain elements that I decided to change for the other character. And this really is useful for many things. For example, if you're working on something, you're kind of drawing a blank, you don't know what to do, or you want to start from somewhere, you know, this is a great approach for that. You're not drawing a blank, you're actually working from something, from some sort of model. It's pushing you to get busy, to start drawing. That's the very first step. That's a big challenge in a lot of ways. If you're a beginner, especially, you know, that it could be intimidating. You could be questioning on whether it's the right time, if you feel motivated or not, and all the doubts start creeping in before you sit down to actually do anything. So these are ways to kind of go beyond that, not focus on that and just focus on drawing, focus on the process more than anything. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to do one more example here, and then I'm going to move on to the next lesson. So I'm going to try to fill up. Goal is to fill up the page as much as possible. So I'm going to try to do that here. I'm going to have to draw a model that's a little bit smaller. Maybe move things over. So as always, I'm keeping it light. I'm not pressing too hard. It's a really important stage. It's a really important step to ensure that you have room to change things if you need to. So in this example, I saw that it might be a little bit too close to this model here. I'm gonna need to leave some room for hair and that sort of stuff. Now, one of the best things about getting in the rhythm, having the same approach towards starting out your drawing when it comes to the face, when it comes to the profile, when it comes to the frontal view, three-quarter view, you build yourself a habit of where to start. And that way you're not kind of wandering around with your pencil and being like, I hope it's going to actually get to where I need it to go. You have a process, you have certain guides that you go by in order to achieve the goal of like constructing the face, and that allows you to get to the stage of defining lines quicker. You know, it's like you don't really want to mess around with the ingredients as much. Let's say if we're talking about like cooking or something, you don't want to mess around with the ingredients so much. You kind of want to get to the point where you're decorating the cake. You know, you're putting on the icing on the cake, basically. It's the fun part. It's the part where your creativity comes out. You know, you're not really focusing so much on all these nitty-gritty little details. So the way you do it is you build yourself a process. You know, you're always going to start out with the circle. You're going to create these guidelines, and little by little start building the figure, building whatever it is that you're drawing. And the more you get into the habit of it, the faster that process becomes, as opposed to not having a process, not having any sort of approach, and always kind of approaching it as a guessing game. That really stifles your speed, you know, or getting to that stage where you really get your creativity out and you get to do all this like fun stuff. You never get a chance to practice something so that it becomes almost like a flawless process for you. So that's why I think it's really important to get into a habit of it. It really speeds things up. So as I mentioned, for me, it's starting out with the circle, creating the guidelines, always keeping it light, and just creating general shapes. You know, nothing too specific. I'm not really spending time on anything really, and I'm just creating placeholders. I'm creating big shapes as a way to say, okay, let's start from here. Let's at least get this down and figure out the parameters, figure out, as you guys saw, where I want to place the image on the paper. Is it going to be too close to this character, that character, towards the bottom, etc.? And to make sure that things fit in. So that's another benefit of that process. So the mouth is similar to the original photo, but I'm not going to have it droop so low. Like you can see, like that line right there. Here, it's going to be less so. It's going to be less of a downward direction when it comes to the mouth. Gonna change the nose a little bit. And notice also the indentation varies for every single nose. Like you could see here, this one is really prominent. The indent is right about here, whereas over here the indent is different. Same for her, and also for this new face that I'm working on as well. The indentation is different. So as you can see, the features really vary. There isn't, as I mentioned frequently, there isn't like a standard. It really depends on the person, and that's why I keep encouraging blah, blah, blah. I keep encouraging you guys to draw from all sorts of models, draw from real life, draw from photos, so that way you can get more and more familiar with all these variations. And little things really make a difference. Like, for example, if you pay attention to the ears as well, the ears are different. But all of it combined together. You can't just change the ears and expect it to look different. It's everything combined together. Like, for instance, here you could see that the nose is a lot more pointy and straight towards its base than here. And the ear is different than here. The hair is different. So just adjusting little things here and there throughout the entire face eventually gives you a totally different looking face. And also take a look at the direction of the face, like in comparison to all the other ones. You could see how the curvature is very different here as opposed to here, as opposed to this one, as opposed to her as well. I'm gonna say that these two models have a similar curvature of the face. And that's also a really important one as well, because it's something that I've mentioned before, and I showed you guys examples of like using this as an example, how features shouldn't be on a straight line, touching the straight line. So the finger being the straight line, and as you could see, there's slight curvature. So the nose is the most prominent point, but as you could see, like really there's a curve in order for everything to touch this line, this guideline. So it's the same idea when it comes to you drawing. You want to avoid that. When every feature, like the forehead, the nose, the lips, and their chin, are touching the straight line, then you know where your mistake is, where your drawing looks incorrect. And that's also something to look out for. So there are all these little things to pay attention to, and a lot of the stuff, as I mentioned, it really comes from drawing a lot and copying photos, working from photos, looking at people, really paying attention to all these things to see like what exactly makes this person look right. You know, how can I grasp certain features and translate that into my drawing. And you'll notice that the commonality is no face feature has that going for it. Like all the different parts of the face touching the straight line. You know, that's something that you'll see regardless of what their face features are like, how big their lips are, and how prominent their chin is. No feature is going to be, no face features are all going to be touching this straight line. So that's something to take away. So despite there being so much variation, right, as I mentioned, there's like so many different things, like the shape of the nose, the shape of the eyes, the ears, the shape of the chin, the mouth, like all that. There's like a vast amount of individual looks and sizes and shapes. But there are certain fundamental commonalities, and what I just spoke about, that's one of them. That's something you will see at all times. There's always going to be this curvature to all the face features. The face is going to be protruding out more from the center to form like a curve, as opposed to it being completely flat. I'm not going to go into too much detail when it comes to the hair. It's not really the focus here. All this is just to, again, demonstrate how you can just take certain things here and there and exaggerate stuff. It's not really meant to cover topics of specific features or anything. So that, I would say that pretty much does it. The next for the rest, I guess, for the rest of the stream, I am going to be focusing on a new topic, which is going to be face expressions and facial character. And this one really, it's also a pretty challenging one as well, and this is something that you will improve through observation, really, because when it comes to face expressions, there isn't anything singular. You know, everything affects, like, whatever feature is being exaggerated, whatever feature that it is being drawn, let's say to express shock or to express like worry. There are certain things, like for example, your eyebrows might be more scrunched up, and because your eyebrows are scrunched up, like also your nose is going to be a little bit scrunched up as well, and all these features affect one another. You know, if you're laughing, for example, your eyes are going to crinkle on the sides, right? You're going to have like these crevices that are forming on a side, and that's more of like a natural face expression. So you could even try this in front of a mirror. Like, you could look in a mirror and try to laugh without having to affect your eyes, and you're going to see how strained that looks and how unnatural it looks. And then if you do the natural way, you'll see that there are going to be creases that are going to be forming on the side of your eyes. There are going to be wrinkles that form there. So that's just to say, and that's just to, you know, highlight the point of how when it kind of triggers like a ripple effect throughout your face when it comes to certain genuine face expressions. And that's what you're looking for when it comes to drawing. You want to be able to affect the viewer in some way. You want to invoke certain intrigue, and that's the best way of going about it. It's by drawing more natural face expressions. And at times I've noticed that even in professional work, you know, when somebody's trying to draw somebody who's like really angry, they would draw the mouth in a way that shows that, but the rest of the face is kind of still. So it's kind of like, you know, trying to laugh without having to affect the wrinkles in your eyes. And that kind of waters down the expression. So their body language might show aggression, their mouth might show aggression, but everything else from the nose up isn't affected, or isn't as expressive as everything else. So there's a bit of a disconnect, you know, like the rage that the body language expresses, the rage that his mouth expresses, they all say something very different than what from the nose up is expressing. So it's kind of important to observe that and really try to understand it. So in this model, I'm going to be drawing more of like angered shock. So the same way, starting with the circle, then drawing the guideline down the middle, since it's going to be a frontal shot. Drawing the curvature for the eyes, because it's going to be kind of like the angle is going to be below. So the camera angle is going to be from below as opposed to being straight on the face or from the top down. And because the camera angle is coming from the bottom up, the curvature for the line, the curvature of the line for the eyes is going to be going upwards. So as always, I'm just going to be putting down some placeholders, making sure that the eyes are on this line. They're not higher or lower. The corner of the eyes line up with that line as well. carefully studying the distance between the corner of the eye and the ear, and the corner of the eye and the center line on both sides to make sure that it matches. Not to make the mistake of, let's say, having one side be very close to the middle line and the other one being really far when the shot calls for everything to be centered. Since it's a frontal view, it's not a 3/4 view, it's not a profile view. So it's something to really pay attention to. You wanna avoid that mistake. It's gonna break the drawing. So I'm also paying attention to the reference. I'm paying attention to the angle. So for example, the mouth, right? Like the bottom of the mouth, the bottom of the lip. I'm paying attention to the angle of the lips, like the direction one side is going to as opposed to the other. That's also something really, really important to look out for. So just off of these shadows that you guys are seeing that are forming on the left side, I'm going to give you a second to guess where the light source is coming from, like what the light source is. And that's also really important to pay attention to, because that really applies to any face. It doesn't matter what the face features are, what the angle is. It really depends on where the light source is coming from. That's going to affect where you're going to draw the shadows. So if you guys guessed that the light source is from the top right, you're absolutely right. The light source is always on the opposite side of where the shadows are. So in this example, as I'm drawing the eyes, just to show how everything kind of connects, like as I was talking about, really what the point of this lesson is, just to demonstrate how things ripple through. So because of the anger, and this is because of its genuine expression, because of the anger and shock, I guess, or disbelief in the eyes widen, right? So usually the pupil and the iris, they're kind of like creating like a half moon for the eyes. You don't really see like the white area of the eyes or going around the eye. That's only visible when the eyes are widened, when somebody is just really shocked, and not only does the pupil dilate, it also the eyes themselves, the lids, open up even more in form of like disbelief, and your eyes just kind of want to get a better scope of what's going on, to orient oneself. So along with the brows, the furrowing of the brows, you have this other feature that's affected by it. You could see that the nose is crinkling up as well. The ears are lower. Usually what we were talking about when it comes to features, I mentioned that the ears really line up at the bottom of the nose and at the top of the eyebrows, right? But that's more of a straight-on view. Like if the camera is leveled with the person, then that would be the case. But once the perspective changes, once the camera shifts, whether it's going towards the top or the bottom, then things start to look different. So for example, here you could see that the nose is a lot closer towards the eyes, right? Like the nostril, there's like no gap in between them, and they're almost on the same line. Whereas if I tilt it further up, that ends up being a different case, right? Like now you could see that there's that distance between the eyes and the nostrils. And then when it comes down to further down, then that also increases. So it really varies depending on the angle. So it's important to learn all the different angles. And that way you're not going to be making a mistake. Like, for example, if you're going to be drawing the face in the same perspective as this, you're not going to make the mistake of drawing the ears on the same line as the eyebrows and at the bottom of the nose, while trying to portray this angle of like from the bottom up. So there are all these little things that put them together end up conveying a different angle, end up conveying a different perspective. So the ears are one of those indicators. When it comes to the bottom up, the ears are lower. And also, as I'm forming the shadows, it's the same process as when you're first starting out the drawing. You're not pressing too hard. Because again, if you like, let's say you press too hard on it and it's going to look like it's way more in shadow than other areas. So you're going to have to follow up with other areas as well. Whereas if you build layer by layer, you can just work all around. And not have to fully commit yet. You know, you could just build the shadows in areas where they need to be. And then once everything is set, then you can go back and start actually giving it more definition and more shading, more tone variation. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm not focusing too much on the tone, the darkness of the shadows, that sort of thing. I'm just trying to establish where all the shadows are. So since we established that the light source is from the top right, you could see on the left, especially at the neck, it's going to be your darkest shadows. That's where light isn't going to reach. So it's a safe bet to say the darkest shadow that you're going to have in this entire drawing is going to be underneath the chin. And once again, since the shadows are forming from the top right, the light source is from the top right, the shadows are going to be forming at the left side. So underneath the lip, again, because the lips protrude out, especially in this case, they're going to cast a shadow underneath themselves. So that's why you're going to see a really dark shadow, almost as dark as the shadow underneath the chin, forming there as well. And as I mentioned from the previous examples, and I'll show you guys real quick. So those of you who remember, this was exactly what this exercise was about, is to talk about a light source and how that affects the face. So when the light source is from the top right, you could see that the top lip is under shadow. The bottom of the lip, underneath the bottom lip, it's also under shadow, while the bottom lip itself is catching the light. And as I mentioned before, think of the light as a beam rather than like how water works, right? Like if you pour water on top of this, it's going to take shape of all parts of the face, whereas a beam is just going straight, and whatever you place in its way is going to catch the light. And the most protruding parts are always going to get more light than any other part of the object or face feature or whatever it is. So in this case, since the light source is coming from the top down, you could see, and it's slightly like the face is kind of curved, or angled, so you could see that shadows are going to be forming at the left side since the light source is at the top right. So as the same as what I was working on, let me just flip back to that. So the same as it is here, you could see that underneath the lip, same as it is here. And this is what's so useful about having a clay model, is because you could move it around, you could adjust it to whatever the light source is or whatever the subject is that you're drawing from, whether it's like a photograph or a person. You could adjust to it and see what the commonalities are, or like what are the fundamental principles that are common amongst both, despite them being very different. So the same as it is here, you could see that the top lip is in shadow while the bottom lip is catching light, same as it is here. Underneath the bottom lip, it's forming shadows as it is here. Anything underneath the chin is starting to form really dark shadows as well. And as you could see here, well, you're going to see more so Let me see if I could just angle it a little bit more. You could see that the shadows are forming for the left side of the face because of the nose. So light source is coming, it's hitting the nose, and it's casting a shadow on this side, similar to how you're seeing it here. So just to demonstrate and show you guys, like, despite some differences in face features, there are all these commonalities when it comes to the light source. When it comes to the light source, and when it comes to how shadows are formed on a face, regardless of the features. And drawing all these little folds underneath the eye is also excellent. It's a way to like exaggerate the emotion that he is going through, and it adds to like the frustration and shock. Well, everybody, I'm gonna have to end the stream here for Figure Drawing Basics. I'm gonna get ready for the next stream, which is gonna be the project stream, and I'm pretty excited about that one. It is something that I'm working on from my imagination. It's a scene that I'm creating, and it's getting closer and closer towards its final stages. I'm in a coloring stage now, finally, after doing some more work on the line work, on, let's say, the pencil work, I guess, and the inking. And I finally transitioned into working on colors. So you guys are going to see some progress from there. make sure you tune in then. I'm going to take that 5-minute break, and I'll see you guys in just a few. Hello viewers, welcome to Art Lounge Alley. This is my project stream. It's part 63. And this is what I'm working on. So I did some more work off stream. I guess not too much. Actually, I don't remember where I left off last time. And that's part of the reason why it would have been better to record all that so I could actually tell. But yeah, I did more work on the background. I did more work on the stores, basically. And I'm kind of saving the characters for last. It's like best for last kind of thing. And the way I've been working on it, I'm going to show you guys real quick, for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time. Let's see, where is it? Okay, there you go. So I started out with doing these 3 layers, basically. One for the background, one for the stores, and one for the floor. Just because having to, let's say, start out by doing the little details that you see on the floor, all the garbage, let's say I'm doing that, and I'm working on the robot's shoes and working on all these other figures. After I put in all those colors, to have to work around them to fill in all the places for the floor, it's really tedious. Like, you could see there's like all these different little areas. So rather than having to do that, I'm layering on top of them. So I'm layering on top of the backgrounds. And then having to kind of work from the background towards the foreground is my general approach. So let me find that other layer. So I started out with the buildings, and then I ended up doing the cars. Oops. The flying cars. Having to work around, not having to work around the buildings, really. So, and if I made any mistakes on the cars, I could just easily erase them, and it's not going to erase the buildings. Let's see here. And then after working on the flying cars, I started working on the storefronts. Also worked on the car in the foreground, I guess the top right corner. And these aren't really permanent colors. I mean, I am liking some of them. I'm kind of liking this game, and I do want it to be like a vibrant sort of scene. I can actually just go back and change a lot of this stuff because everything is on a different color. So because it's all if I hide this layer here, I could just select these specific colors. It does a pretty good job about selecting them. I want to say that there should be like a color range. Select color gamut. Yeah, I remember when it came to Photoshop, that was something that you could do. You could just select based on color, and it would just select it wherever it is in the photo or in the image. And I want to say it's probably the same in Clip Studio Paint as selection color gamut. but it's not doing a great job. But yeah, just really the important thing is I'm able to select the areas that I want to change later, and then play around with the colors. So like I could just select that, go to edit, do hue saturation, and then I could just easily change that around. So that's one of the reasons why I chose to just select everything, or create everything first of all on a different layer specifically for this, not to interfere with anything else, and also choose all these different colors for places that I might want to change as I move through the image. So I'm just going to continue working on filling in with solid color all these different elements. And I'm not really going to focus on color choice as much until everything has a solid color on it. I think that's going to make it easier to make the choices, because everything kind of affects everything. You know, the way that the characters are going to be colored is going to affect all the other color choices that I'm going to have done. This little rat friend here who's also tuning into his music. Can't have a city theme without some rats around. And speaking of that, I just recently saw some post about how New York City is having like a huge rat problem. Surprise, surprise. So, city officials are proposing that people put out trash later, as opposed to early on giving all these mice a feast. But I don't think that's going to solve the problem. I think they just have to have like people come in and picking up the trash earlier, because I think having to put out trash later means that people are gonna have to stay much later, or they're gonna have like a person designated for taking out specifically the trash at a specific time. But I remember them having like rat issues forever. And I think most businesses anyways, they close around like, I don't know, 10 o'clock. Or 11 o'clock or something, and that's usually when they take out the trash. So I'm not really sure what that solution is really gonna, or if it really is a solution, rather than them just reminding people like, hey, take out the trash at this time. I don't know. Dirty City. Just kind of curious what other colors would look right. And it looks like maybe blue might be like a purplish blue might be the best. Just going to use this color for now to fill in areas that that just weren't visible. Now there's a different method that I think a lot of people use, which is using the lasso tool to make a selection and filling in that selection to avoid the things that I was talking about when it comes to making a selection. Like when you guys saw that I selected the color specifically, it left out just like a border of that color around, and what ends up happening is after you fill in that color or you change that color, the previous color that you had still sticks around with that border that wasn't selected. So maybe I could demonstrate it after all of this is filled in. But what I like about this process is that it is drawing, you know, whereas I think the lasso tool is a very technical approach. You know, like you really are, whoops. So I'm kind of sacrificing that, and I feel like I can always make that change. You know, once I select it and once I fill it in with the color that I want and then adjust it, I can always go back and just touch up those areas and make them look right. Not too worried about the face. In fact, I'm not really worried about a lot of these features because, as I mentioned, since this is going to be a layering process, now I'm going to be doing the characters on top of this layer, it's going to cover that up. So if it's a little bit messy, it's no big deal. I'm going to make a selection. I'm going to select all these areas, and you guys will see what I'm talking about in this example, why a lot of people use the lasso tool instead of the method that I'm actually using right now. So let's say I'm going to change the color to something else. Say I'm going to do it to like, let me take the time to find a color that might work. And I think I was leaning more towards like a teal. Like a teal looked interesting there. It's kind of similar to the actual color that I was using. I'm going to hide the selection so that way I could get a better view. All right, so for the sake of the example, I'm gonna pick like a purplish color. Very different from the blue. And now when I zoom in, you guys see that right there? See all that blue, those blue lines that are still around? That's what you're trying to avoid. I mean, that's why people use the lasso tool to make a selection of the areas and then fill it in. Because when they fill it in, and I'm gonna do a quick demonstration here. I'm going to find an area. I'm going to take this circle right here. I'm going to use the lasso tool to make this selection here. And I'm going to go to edit. I'm going to fill it in. So once that's filled in, I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to edit, color change it to something completely different, like yellow. Let's do yellow. And then, as you could see, that color isn't there. So I'm going to first erase all this previous stuff just to make the example even better. Gonna make that selection again. Edit fill. And now I'm gonna deselect it. And do the same thing that I was doing with these other sections where I was just selecting them using the lasso tool. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to change the color the same way as I was changing the purple. I'm going to do yellow again. And now I'm going to deselect it. Zoom in, and there shouldn't be any blue visible. See that? It makes a perfect selection of it. And that's because when you use the fill tool, there is no gradient for it. Like when I make a brush stroke, right, when I use this, you could see in that brush stroke this area right here. I'm gonna use this right here. Oops. Gonna really reduce it. You guys could see that right there. Or let me just use a pencil. Oof. Huge. Should be able to do one with no. Trying to find like a really good, like you see that right there, it has this like outside glow kind of, or like very faint pixels right there. Whereas if I make a selection, say I do that and then go to edit, fill, it's less so, I'm gonna say. I mean, it's still present there, but less so if I was to, let's say, I'm gonna do that. You know, there's a lot more gradient. There are a lot more little areas there. So that's basically the benefit of it, as opposed to just using the brush pen. Now I'm gonna switch back. And I'm going to zoom in, and you guys see there's like no yellow there. See that? But I would prefer just to keep on painting rather than doing that very technical approach, and do what you're seeing me do right now, which is just coming in and fixing those areas. And that could be done like at the very end, when once I pick all the colors and you know, choose the ones that I want to stick with, and everything else is finished. It'll be like the polishing stage where I could just zoom in and find areas like this, if they're even noticeable, because sometimes it really is irrelevant. Like it's so small that nothing is really affected by it. But in this case, I'm gonna say that's not it. Oops. Now, I increased the tolerance just a bit to like 23 because I find that it selects even more of that specific color. Like as you saw, once I increased it up to like 50, then it started selecting colors that are similar. So like even though this is like a light, almost violet, it started selecting purple as well as I increased the tolerance. But if you keep the tolerance around like 23, I think it does a pretty good job about selecting things. So like I'm going to delete this, I'm going to deselect, and as you can see, like a lot of those colors is deleted. So you just have to kind of play around with the tolerance. You have to play around with the selection to avoid those outer edges, those glowing edges that you saw. But anyways, I'm just going to quickly play around, see some other color that might match. I mean, there's so many variations because you also could increase the saturation. You can make it more bright, or you could make it a darker one. That's kind of like the whole battle with it. Once I select the colors that I want. Just gonna keep it there for now. As I mentioned, like once I start filling up other parts and giving everything basically a flat color, then I'll come back and really try to select the ones that I want. And also this process helps me get better at Wacom tablets because I don't have a Cintiq, so there's a disconnect really. Like I'm staring at the screen and I'm not really looking at the pencil. And sometimes the eye being there to guide the pencil really makes things a lot easier. So I'm battling with that right now. But I think it's for the better because as something I talked about before, something called blind contour drawing, which is like you covering your sketchbook. If you're doing it traditionally, you're covering the sketchbook. You're not able to see the pencil. You're not really able to see your hand and help guide it. And all you're doing is you're focusing on the subject and you're just imagining where your hand is and where your lines are, and you're imagining how long you're making the lines. So if you're drawing the nose, you're just kind of imagining, well, okay, it starts here and it goes all the way down. So it creates this kind of challenge in your head, and it really pushes you to connect and feel what you're doing. You know, you're feeling how far you're making a line, for instance, for the nose or for the ears or something. And eventually you become really, really good at it. I mean, I talked about this before, but where I saw when I was younger, I worked at a museum, and in that museum they had these figure drawing lessons. It was part of the perk of working there. So I would go and I would sit in on these figure drawing lessons, and one of the instructors there, they were demonstrating how to do blind contours, and that's what they did. They covered up their hand completely. There was no way they were able to see it. And they drew the model, but they drew it so precise. It's almost as if though they didn't even bother covering the drawing pad. That's how precise they were with blind contour, with that technique. And you guys should challenge yourself and see what kind of results. You're going to get some wacky results. You know, your drawing is going to look ridiculous. It's going to look like an abstract drawing. You know, it's not going to make any sense the first time you sit down to do it. So just sit down, get a pad, cover it with, let's say, another piece of paper, like a big giant piece of paper, to give your hand freedom to move around. Whereas if you use like a cloth, I think it's going to drape over the pencil and it's going to like weigh down the pencil. But if you use like a big piece of paper and just cover it, like a newspaper print is perfect for it. You just cover your hand and try to draw the subject, something simple even. and see where your results are going to be, because once you lift your hand from the paper, you don't know where to continue. Like, how do you know where to put down where you left off? You know, you can't look at the paper, right? You can't look at the hand. So it becomes this challenge and of having to really keep tabs of things in your mind's eye. Basically, you're imagining all the lines that you're making and trying to be as accurate and precise about your guesstimate, kind of, or your feeling of where you left off, and just working from that. And just see how challenging it is. It's incredibly challenging. And I think you'll find some interesting results. But that instructor that I was talking about, it was no problem. You know, they sat down, they did that, and it came out great. So I kind of take it as a challenge to do it with this Wacom tablet that I have, to repeat that. Whoops. Uh-oh. That's kind of interesting. That's by mistake. kind of want to include tech in here, so it's coming along. I'm digging it. I am digging it. Might play around with this color. I was thinking of just keeping it black. But why not? I'm taking this as a really big challenge because there's so much color going on here. But I think it just adds to the whole idea of all this, which is just to distract people as much as possible. You know, the more things that they could dangle in front of a person's eye, the better. You know, they don't want you to be focused, you know, and recognizing that all your time and your entire life and existence is being exploited for their greed. The more asleep you are, the better it is for them. Just kind of like what this whole logo on his head is. Sleep. didn't pay much attention to these buildings in the background here. It's kind of important to fill them in. That was a cool little number. Classical number. I kind of want to make this building here in color. Like, I don't want to make it gray because I feel like it's just going to make it kind of boring. Like, there's already enough amount of gray. And gray is like a good neutral color, so if you don't know what to do with colors, you could always use that. And any other color that you're going to use around it is going to work well. It's perfect for that reason. Now moving on to Porky's font. Whoops. I'm gonna give it also an obnoxious color. You know, marketing, the subliminal messaging of things. Red being associated with so many things. Like it is a color for lust, right? Which is it's a primal sort of instinct. It's also something that is used for like Valentine's Day. So whenever people see these colors, it usually triggers favorable emotions for marketing. You know, people make associations whenever they see those colors. And of course, it's very vibrant. So it's going to capture somebody's attention, especially coupled with, you know, pictures of food as you see on the screen, or on the window rather. But really, this color is a placeholder. I'm probably going to play around with it some more. This isn't going to be a neon sign. Whereas this welcome sign is just kind of like why I'm like holding off on playing around with it. Because it's going to be neon, so I'm going to have to do a little bit more work on there. But again, I'm just trying to fill in as much as possible with solid colors so that I can come back to it later. Dare I make that gray? me try to select it and see if it's going to select. Why is it selecting everything else? It's not even the same color. It's like just selecting all of them. Maybe because of tolerance. So I'm going to lower the tolerance to 12. There you go. As long as I could select it. That's what's important here. I am gonna have to end the stream soon, ladies and gents. I actually have to get back to working on my other project after this today, so might end it just a bit earlier than usual. But I am really into this. Like I'm happy that I'm getting closer and closer towards a more finalized stage. Like as much as I'm enjoying this, I do want to create more projects, create more content. Ooh, a little dark there, pretzel. What? Or maybe it's appropriate because I have to end the stream. Bit of a sad outro. Nah. I'm gonna fix this mistake down here, and then I'm gonna have to call it a night, ladies and gents. I am on the right layer, and this is just consistency right here. Continuing the border of the door. Alright, maybe one more thing. Which is gonna be these windows up here. Oh, wrong color, wrong layer. Alright, it's okay. Whoops. Gonna go back to... Oh, this is the store layer. Why is it? Why is it being funny? Gonna go back to tolerance 23. What is going on? Alright, here it is. Just have to select 4 referred layers instead of refer to all layers. That's a big difference. When it refers to all layers, then it selects the pencil work, and that has a lot of detail. That's why I was selecting all the screws and everything else. So let's see if we could change this to... That's kind of the color that I was thinking. Like a yellowish, but it doesn't seem to fit either. That's kind of cool. Nah, it's too close. It's too close to the taxi. But I did like this. Probably the best option. Well, that does it for the stream, everybody. I'm going to be back tomorrow, don't worry. I will be doing the same lineup. It's going to be Figure Drawing Basics at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then the project I'm going to be continuing with coloring, putting on more solid colors everywhere, and that's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so tune in then to see what's going to happen with this. Alright everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow.